And here's Mr. Seaman reading Mr. Men books. First we'll start with Mr. Clumsy. He was a clumsy character. You know, Roger Hargraves, the man. Here we go. You ready for it? Mr. Clumsy. It was rather a nice morning. In the sky, the sun was up, shining. In trees, the birds were up, singing. But in a rather scruffy house in the middle of a field, somebody wasn't up. Can you guess that somebody might be? His alarm clock went off. Yeah, it did. Like a mobile annoying phone. Yeah. Mr. Clumsy woke up and reached out an arm to switch off his alarm clock and knocked it on the floor. Whoops, he said. That's the third alarm clock I've broken this week. Mr. Clumsy, as you might have guessed, was rather clumsy fellow. Yes, yep. And he didn't learn. Oh well. He got out of bed and switched on the radio. The knob came off in his hand. Whoops, he said. That's the second radio I've broken this month. Well, it's only a couple of months. It's not a week. It's fine. He went downstairs and the postman had been, and there was a letter waiting for Mr. Clumsy lying on the doormat. He picked it up and went to the kitchen. First things first, he said, and took out a slice of bread out of his bin and popped it into the toaster. Now, he thought, I wonder who this letter's from. Seems he's falling down the stairs as he's wondering. He looked at the letter in his hand, but the letter wasn't in his hand. What was in his hand was a slice of bread. I don't understand it, he said. Where's the letter gone? Can you guess where the letter's gone? That's right. He put the letter in the toaster instead of the bread. And there was browning nicely. Whoops, he said, fishing is out. Oops, he said, dropping it. It's hot. And also not a letter anymore. And what probably would have been better to read the toast anyway. Mr. Clumsy bent down to pick up... Wait a minute. Mr. Clumsy bent down to pick the letter up. That's better. But in doing so, banged his forehead on the kitchen table. And in doing so, he fell forwards and got his head stuck in the bread bin. All of which wasn't surprising, really. And as we said, he was a rather clumsy fellow. Hence Mr. Clumsy. In fact, he was a very clumsy fellow. Actually, he was the clumsiest person in the world. Well, I beg to differ, because this is just a cartoon character, but there are a lot of clumsy people in the world, and clumsy's good. And somehow, while he was in the bank, Mr. Clumsy, while he was writing a check, managed to spill ink all over the bank manager. Whoops, said Mr. Clumsy. And there you have an ink-reeled bank man. And then somehow managed to trip over his shoelaces and somehow managed to fall into the butcher's shop window and somehow managed to finish up with a string of sausages around his neck. Whoops, he said. Whoops, just whoops. Whoops, you did all that and whoops. Mr. Clumsy. Whoops, said Mr. Clumsy and went on his way, rubbing his head. Nobody arrested him, did nothing, just let him go. Well, he's got stuff thrown in his head. On his way home, called in at the arm at the farm for some eggs. And somehow, while crossing the farmland, he managed to trip up. And somehow, as he was falling, he managed to grab hold of the farmer, and somehow they both managed to finish up in the duck pond. Splash! Whoops, said Mr. Clumsy. Please, said the farmer as they sat together in the duck pond, in the future, can I deliver the eggs to you? That's extraordinarily kind of you, said Mr. Clumsy. Don't mention it, mentioned the farmer. Mr. Clumsy went home after having a great time in the puddle with the farmer, who he didn't mention had all this other type of stuff that they didn't write in the book. But that's why he tricked the farmer into falling into the pond. Mr. Clumsy went home. First things first, he said, and went for a bath. But as he was stepping into the bath, his foot somehow managed to slip on the soap and he somehow managed to turn a somersault and somehow managed to land on his head in the linen basket. And in a muffled voice, he said, "Whoops, I'm Mr. Clumsy."